What if your brain isn't broken, but brilliant?
What if the things you beat yourself up for were actually the best parts of you?
The neurodivergent ones that also are people pleasers, but there's nothing wrong with them. They're not broken.
No, they're not. They're very gifted.
In this episode, I sit down with Christine Molina to talk ADHD, autism, trauma, and the gifts inside every brain.
But a brain setup like ADHD or autism or some of these other brains that are wired differently, that doesn't go away. That's how you're wired. It's part of who you are. That doesn't have to be a fix.
But what if the very thing you've been ashamed of is actually your superpower?
Is there something wrong with my brain?
And here's the part nobody's telling you.
It's the very thing you've been hiding that could be your greatest strength.
When you don't know how your brain works, you feel broken.
Don't miss this episode of Empowering Women in Conversations, because if you've ever been told you're too much or not enough, this conversation will change everything.
Welcome to Empowering Women in Conversations, podcast to empower and uplift women by providing a safe space for them to share their stories and experiences and encourage the strength, resilience, and power of women. If you are tired of putting others' needs before your own, leading to burnout and resentment, and you are ready to transform and create relationships that are supportive rather than draining, join us on this journey of women overcoming adversities and achieving their true empowerment. Here's your host, a licensed professional counselor, Anita Sandoval.
I'm so honored to welcome today's guest, Christine Molina, a licensed clinical social worker, EMDRIA-Approved Consultant, and EMDR certified therapist based in Austin, Texas. Christine is not only a deeply compassionate counselor, but also a skilled consultant and trainer whose work centers around EMDR therapy, neurodiversity, attachment, and trauma. And she facilitated neuro-affirming trainings across the country on autism, ADHD, and how we can shift the way we view the incredible range of ways our brains are wired to process the world. And in addition to providing EMDR basic trainings, she also co-facilitates an advanced EMDR course that integrates polyvagal theory and ego state therapy for complex trauma, and bringing cutting-edge insights into healing and nervous system regulation. And her therapy toolkit is wide-ranging, deeply integrative. Alongside EMDR, Christine incorporates AEDP, IFS, ego state therapy, somatic experiencing, clinical hypnosis. Do you say DARE or D-A-R-E?
I say DARE. It stands for Rewiring Attachment Systems.
Awesome. DARE and DBT, all with the goal of helping her clients not to only heal, but also to thrive and love their brain. Christine, welcome to the show. I'm so grateful to have you here with us today.
I'm so excited to be here, Donita, and see you again.
I know. Oh my gosh, I've been meaning to reach out to you because when I became first trained in EMDR, we have to go and practice with other therapists. And we had to use a memory that was something small, nothing big. And I remember going, okay, we'll do this one little memory. And I remember that when we tried doing it, the other person was telling me, what's your scale of how you feel the distress? And I would tell her, and she's like, are you sure? Just with something like that, I got discombobulated from 0 to 100. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I can't work with her because I was feeling my body. And I turned to you because you were the one facilitating. And right away, you grounded me by throwing tissue box back and forth. And then we settled the memory. And it was so quick. And I was like, whoa, how did I go from 0 to 100 to calming and processing in an instant? And I never got it until I became certified as an ADHD provider. And then I said, whoa, there was nothing wrong with me. Because all these years I thought, maybe that trauma was more than I thought. Is there something wrong with my brain?
Yeah.
And these are common thoughts for neurodivergence. And that's why I wanted to bring you in, because I wanted you to help our community, the neurodivergent ones, that also are people pleasers, that there's nothing wrong with them. They're not broken.
No, they're not. They're very gifted. There's a lovely book that I really adore. It's called The Power of Different, The Link Between Genius and Disorder.
Okay.
I think it's by Gail Souse. I remember I was doing laundry one day and I heard her talking on some talk show. And I'm like, there is someone else who looks at brains like I do, where it's really a gift. And she has this one phrase that I love is our weaknesses are just the flip side of our strengths. There are so many gifts with neurodivergence, but what you're describing happens all the time, Anita, is when you don't know how your brain works, you feel broken. Sometimes people say, oh, I feel like there's a million things wrong with me because other people can do things that just seem elusive to me. Or sometimes I can do it and sometimes I can't. And I don't know when my abilities are going to show up. So maybe you wait till the last minute to write a paper.
Yeah.
You're trying to write an email at work and you can't get your brain to get the words out. Learning about how your brain works is incredibly empowering and exciting. Then you can play to your strengths.
Oh,
And you can not get tripped up by the things that are harder in your challenges.
yes. I love how you said that. And before we delve into the main discussion, I would love for you to share a little bit about your background and what led you to specialize with working with neurodivergent individuals and trauma therapy.
Well, some people pick a specialty, and some people, the specialty picks them. So I fall into the latter bucket. A lot of neurodivergent folks, after they go through the pipeline of high school, college, you get into your 20s and you have this wide open field and with less structure. And it can be hard to figure out with all the structure and possibilities how you can find your next step. We live today in a pretty mental health savvy society. And I was blessed in my 20s. That was 20 years ago. But back then it was the same way. People knew about therapy. And so I've always loved the phrase that successful people work on themselves. And so I started therapy and I started some career exploration. And, like most neurodivergent folks, I had anxiety. And I was so lucky because I had more of a less obvious presentation of ADHD with accountability. I did really well at projects and focus, but I would have the anxiety of not knowing why I can write now and not at this other time. And I was so excited that when learning about ADHD from my therapist at the time, because I discovered I wasn't stupid. When a little kid doesn't know how their brain works and why can I do it then and I don't do it and I can't do it now? What gets laid down is I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. And so for me to learn about my brain, it was so empowering. It helped me in the business world. And so when I became a therapist years later, going through a long exploration process of what I wanted to do, I made that part of how I did therapy because neurodiversity is really common, much more common than people realize. And so when someone would come in with ADHD or autism, I start teaching them in addition to working on all the other therapy stuff we need with emotion regulation, relationships, anxiety and depression. I mean, that's just so common in our society. I would also start helping them learn about their brain so they could have the same experience I did, realizing, oh my goodness, I don't have to shut down. I can succeed. And they start to believe in themselves. It's life-changing.
That's beautiful. I love that you shared your story because I want the audience to know that you're not alone, that even therapists or other successful people are neurodivergent and we can be successful. And it's very common to say, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? I'm not good enough, which are common negative beliefs that we carry if we're people pleasers as well. You did mention the work with neurodivergence, but also with trauma. I know they tend to overlap in certain ways, and they often get missed, especially in women. What are your thoughts on how they are missed?
Oh, so in women, they're missed because sometimes they have a less standard presentation. than what our stereotypes. In the 80s, they had this idea that there was the hyperactive boy who can't sit still. And everyone thought that's ADHD. And then we came about these diagnoses in brains from the medical model. And so the medical model in physical health is something's wrong with you, let's fix it. Right. And so with mental health, coming about it, I mean, there's some stuff like depression, anxiety, they're things that go away. But a brain setup like ADHD or autism or some of these other brains that are wired differently, that doesn't go away. That's how you're wired. It's part of who you are.
Yeah.
Right. And it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be a fix. So I think some of our perceptions were skewed because of how this developed and how the mental health field developed. So then in the 80s and early 90s, there was a real reaction among therapists and clients to this medical model. And so Judy Singer, she founded the term neurodiversity. And that just meant we had different ways of socializing, regulating emotions, how our brain works. And it also included not only the struggles, but the strengths. And so that was a big thing, because if you hear about your brain and all you hear is that it's a problem, that you're sick, and that there are these challenges that come with it, it's like you have a glass floor. It's like a death sentence to some people. So, and then in the 90s, what happened is a lot of therapists and mental health professionals and psychiatrists discovered that either they had ADHD or their children had ADHD. And Dr. Amen is a really well-known one. He discovered his daughter had ADHD. And before that, he thought different when kids were acting out or struggling, it was the parents' fault for how they raised them. Trauma says it's how you were raised and that's why you're struggling. And that was the kind of the going thought then. But then he had a kid that was really easy to raise. And the second kid was completely different. And the parents were the same. And so he realized, oh, it's not that. And he started doing research. He does brain scans on the brain. And he started realizing, no, this is kind of how the brain's wired is why she's struggling. And so he really focuses on helping neurodivergent folks get what they need with their body physically, and then medication through brain scans. And then I think he does some coaching too. So there's lots of ways to work with it. And so he and a number of other people started putting out stuff about, hey, it's not just the struggles or strengths. When we go to therapy, we want help with our challenges because we're doing great with our strengths.
Yeah.
They're easy to us.
Yeah.
We don't want extra support with them.
Yeah.
But that leaves this false impression that if all you see is an ADHD or struggling in therapy once a week or twice every other week, then you're going to think that that's the only thing that goes with the brain.
Yeah.
But if you have it in your personal life, you realize how many things you can do well because of that brain. And that's not the whole story. So there's a lot of books that came out in the 90s called You're Not Sick, Lazy, and Crazy and stuff like that about the gifts of ADHD. And unfortunately, the autism world is like 30 years behind or a couple decades behind.
Yeah.
And so we just in the last couple of years started coming out with less obvious autism. And what that looks like, because we've had all these stereotypes and myths, there's like one way autism presents when it's so multifaceted.
Yes.
So there's also a lot of autistic people. So as they're talking about their lived experience, it's also becoming more normalized in our population, just like ADHD is now.
Yeah.
And so a lot of us are working on that. I give trainings. I've given trainings to the general public and to therapists to really normalize autism.
Yeah.
Because I think that's really important. And both ADHD and autistic brains are wonderful brains. They tend to have a very high percentage of them who are very successful entrepreneurs, doctors, entertainment, corporate. There's a joke. There's an article I read on Forbes called Executive ADHD.
Oh.
As you climb the corporate ladder, the gift of ADHD of being a visionary is highly sought after. So you're going to have more ADHDers as you go up the corporate chain, because the gifts of ADHD are really valued and highly sought after. And same with autism in many, many professions.
When women go to the doctors and let's say they're misdiagnosed with bipolar or maybe there's a hormonal imbalance, what would be like a best tip to give them to see do I have ADHD? Do I have autism and ADHD, or is it really bipolar or hormonal deficiency?
Well, what you can do on your own is screeners and
Okay.
self-education.
Okay.
That's not going to give you the whole story. You just, for anything in therapy, you want to rule out anything physical because hormones can really affect things, right?
Yeah.
And, there's so like you have low thyroid. That's going to cause depression. So you want to rule out anything physical. You want to get neuropsychological testing if you want something official. But there's a lot of screeners out there that are really helpful. My favorite is the Diva. Is a 5.0 you pay for, but the Diva 2.0 is free online. It goes through every category of ADHD criteria in the DSM, and they have a click box for the less obvious presentation. Like if you can't sustain a focus, if you just do that one criteria in the DSM, you might think, well, no, I focus fine. But the clarifier for less obvious is you have to try really hard and go really slow so you don't miss the details.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so then I ask questions of how it would have presented in childhood because you need to have it in childhood and adulthood for both ADD and autism. For autism, embraceautism.com
Okay.
has a bunch of wonderful screeners for folks to see if they're autistic. And so if you have odd ADHD, which is ADHD and autism, you'll qualify both for an ADD diagnosis and an autistic diagnosis.
Wow, that's so good I love that you're giving all the websites because that way I'm going to write them down, put them in the show notes because it's good to be self-aware that the first step for any change is just awareness. And I love the internet because you can look for information just to become aware. I'm not saying to self-diagnose because you have to go to the doctor and then they'll give you a formal diagnosis because that's what happened to me. I'm like, oh yeah, I know I'm ADHD, but I never got a formal diagnosis until I went to the doctor. And, within age, I've noticed that my symptoms presented even more. And I don't know if it has to do with my healing because I know I have PTSD in remission. And so once I healed from the trauma, I now noticed the symptoms of ADHD a little bit more and was able to discern, oh, wait, but this isn't the trauma. This is something else. What is that? And of course, when I get older in age, I was like, okay, something's going on. So we checked the hormones, everything was fine. And that's when I said, okay, I'm going to have to go to a psychiatrist and see what's going on. And yeah, lo and behold, she gave me my formal diagnosis with ADHD. And it's amazing. And medication may not be for you, but it is for me. And it's like putting on the glasses and going, oh my gosh, I can see.
Crazy.
It's just amazing what I missed out on all this stuff these past years, but this is why we do what we do. And so another big theme for me, because my little niche that I like to do is people pleasing and appeasing as a survival skill. And I noticed that there's certain demographics that it appears more aside from women. But how do you see that showing up in your neurodivergent clients?
Oh, absolutely. So I think that can show up a lot with neurodivergent clients. So when you grow up, and you don't know how your brain works. And maybe if you have ADHD with the executive functioning challenges, it's hard to do your homework or keep your room clean or the clutter. And then how do parents respond? They get mad. And because they might not know, instead of teaching you how to work with your brain and use strategies to get it done, they'll just yell at you. Or if they have undiagnosed ADHD and emotions go from 0 to 100 with some of the frustrations of parenting, that might come out like really loud and scary for a little kid. And then a little kid who has a sensitive nervous system is going to feel those emotions even more intensely, right? So that they might just shut down.
Yeah.
And so when you try to do things and you can't do it, and people are always getting mad, of course you're going to people please because that's a survival response. I just have to make them happy. Or the message is I can't do it. So you don't rely on your own sense of what to do. You actually just defer to others.
Oh, wow. That makes
Yeah.
sense. That makes sense. You defer to others and it's more of seeking their validation because you don't know how to function. You want to function and compare to a neurotypical. And so you just people please and go with the flow. Someone like masking
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I remember I said this story to a friend of mine because I was like, how do I know if I'm masking or people pleasing? And I was reflecting on that, and I remembered an incident when my friend was telling me a joke, and we work out together, and I laughed, and she goes, "No, no, no, no." And she told me the joke again. And I'm telling you again, she said, because I know you tend to laugh just because, and I know you don't get it. So I'm telling you again so you can get it. And I had no idea I was masking. And then I said, okay, if I was people pleasing, I would have known and processed the joke, knew it wasn't funny, and I would have laughed so I could belong. But if me, jokes for me, it's just something that it takes a while for me to process. I'm very literal. And so the fact that she told me again, and then I got it, and she was patient with me to make sure I understood it and what it meant, see, that was masking. And so that's how I saw the difference. And it's just amazing, how people pleasing and masking can tend to overlap as well.
They do. They do. And
Yeah.
it doesn't even matter figuring out the difference. The journey is learning to figure out what you need and to
Mm.
trust yourself. Both of those things are outside of you, masking or people pleasing. And so that's part of the journey as a neurodivergent person to figure out what you need. So, for example, sometimes when neurodivergent peoples go to restaurants, nowadays the din is very loud because they want you in and out, right? But if you have sensory sensitivities, it can be really hard to follow a group conversation in the flow with all that noise. And so unmasking would be realizing, oh, I don't like that.
Mhm.
Let me eat outside with you so I can focus.
Yeah. Yes, I love that.
People pleasing would be, I'm going to eat inside
Uh,
because I want everyone else to be happy. But unmasking is something you don't even realize because it's been the way things should be done your whole life. You're just trying to function how you think people should function. You don't realize that you need to do it differently.
yes. I love how you said that. I've had some patients that are ADHD. They know they're ADHD, but then let's say they're entering a relationship and they go, well, I'm neurodivergent and this thing bothers me that you do. So you need to not do it. And I'm just like, okay, you're the one with the ADHD, not them. And telling them to be in control of your ADHD symptoms is different than having accountability if they want, giving them the choice. What are your thoughts on when somebody has ADHD and they want the environment to accommodate to them?
Oh, well, so I think that's a great conversation. So I don't have this graphic on me, but I created a training on EMDR and autism because
Okay.
historically we need a lot of adaptions for EMDR with autistic folks, more so than ADHD.
Okay.
But I think this applies to both ADHD and autism and any kind of neurodivergent brain is we can go to one extreme. We don't want to lose who we are in a relationship. So those who tend to go to people pleasing tend to ignore their own needs.
Okay.
And because of the interoception issues, like sensing into your body, sometimes they don't even realize because you can't connect with your emotions. So
Okay.
that's part of the journey in therapy.
Yeah.
Right. So uncovering your own needs and preferences and bringing them into relationship and communicating them is part of it. But there's also the part of taking self-responsibility because we impact each other as people.
Yeah.
And my neurodivergence is going to impact you and just people in general. That's why corporate businesses, they give these tests on how your brain works, how you manage conflict and projects so people can work together.
Okay.
And I think that applies to the whole society, no matter what kind of brain you have. And so some people, Donna Henderson, she talks about how autistic folks tend to manage conflict. Of course, everyone's an individual, but these are different categories. It's either my way or the highway.
Yeah.
Because it's flexibility is hard. Or go along to get along, which is your people pleasing, or just exit the relationship. Because conflict's hard.
Yes.
It relies on a lot of different skills. There's this piece of uncovering your own needs and preferences and learning to bring it into the relationship. There's this self-accountability piece that when you impact someone else, the part that falls on your side. to take responsibility. So if your emotions go to 0 and 100, it doesn't mean you can go scream at someone.
Yeah.
You might want to calm yourself down first and then figure out the words and have a discussion, because it's abusive to have that as your conflict resolution style, is just to scream at someone.
Yeah.
Then if you shut down as your conflict resolution style, you're going to be learning to take care of yourself and figure out what your needs are and bring them into the relationship. And then there's also your strengths. Every brain has strengths. The reason neurodivergent folks are wonderful partners is they're compassionate. They tend to be very honest. They tend to be very hardworking. They tend to be very loyal. I mean, these are qualities you want in partners. So you can't just look at the struggles and just blame the neurodivergent brain. Yeah. Every brain has strengths and weaknesses in relationship. We're all trying to work together. And then there's this accommodation piece. We accommodate each other. Yeah. Right? And it's kind of this give and take. So relational conflict is something everyone works on in therapy, no matter what kind of brain you have. It's one of the hardest things that humans can deal with.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. And it's finding the balance to not be codependent with one another, but just to work with one another to be the best versions of ourselves and keeping each other accountable. Oh my gosh, it's quite a balance. And
it's hard.
Yes,
it's
for so hard. And I don't know for other neurodivergents, but I know for me, I take on a lot of the silent labor, which is the administrative tasks. Now I'm realizing that. So now I'm like, I'm not taking that. And so I'm giving it off to my husband. I'm trying to be able to work with each other when it comes to these. Something new that you're doing with your partner, it's going to take time. There's going to be some misses, but before it's pretty, it's going to be messy.
That phrase, successful people work on themselves in relationships, at work. Anything worthwhile requires some work.
Yeah. Yes. Practice makes progress. That's what I say. So
I love it.
Yeah. I had mentioned to Dr. Sproul, and I had told her something about EMDR and ADHD, and she mentioned that the protocol, that there was some issues with progress with EMDR and the neurodivergence. I wanted to explore that a little bit more since you do EMDR with autism and neurodivergent. What was the obstacle when it comes to EMDR and neurodivergent people?
Well, I think what happens with these trauma therapies, they're set up to resolve like stuff that gets locked in the brain that doesn't resolve naturally. So we have these negative beliefs and negative emotions, and they get triggered in the present and they're highly charged, right? But with neurodivergent folks, that's not the whole story of why they're struggling. And so if we only do a trauma therapy working with trauma, you're going to cause a lot of shame for neurodivergent folks. So they're going to think all their struggles are due to trauma. So with what I have found with autistic folks and ADHDers is you need to also, before, as you're doing trauma treatment, when you're starting with challenges in daily life, and we start with the present with more complex presentations, but you have to also help them understand their brain, because the shame is never going to lift. The anxiety is never going to lift, and that depression is never going to lift if you can't figure out how your brain works. And that negative belief, I'm broken, is never going to shift if in the present you still can't figure out how to work with your brain and not shut down, and how to normalize it, and how to communicate. You need to make progress with these things. And then another area that you need to pull out for ADHD and autism is that emotion regulation piece. So we all heard the term highly sensitive people.
Yeah.
Right? And that's with the neurodivergent folks, you have a more sensitive nervous system. And that's true for ADHD, and even more so for autism. I forget who told me this, but one person gave me a stat. Autistic people take in 30 to 50% more information through their senses. And so, sometimes they have a theory called intense world theory, like a supercharged brain that's highly perceptive. It can be like an assault on your senses. Mm-hmm. And so you need to help the brain learn to regulate, because emotions are like hit or miss. Sometimes you can access them, sometimes you can't. They go from 0 to 100 really fast. And so to work with emotion regulation in the beginning is really important too. Not only because of trauma, which can affect emotion regulation, but also because of how the brain's wired. And so doing EMDR, one of the theories of why it works is called interhemispheric communication. It helps the different areas of the brain communicate. So with emotion regulation, that's huge. You need the frontal lobe and the limbic system to communicate a little bit.
Yeah.
So the bilateral stimulation, which is a key component in EMDR, is just using a stimulus, a sensory stimulus to process with the trauma work. It can kind of have the brain connect with emotions a little deeper. So you need to add those pieces in addition to working with those negative self-beliefs that get laid down in the nervous system. And so when you just do EMDR focusing on trauma, but you're leaving out these brain pieces, it doesn't work. And another thing that happens with autistic folks, so both ADHDers and autistic folks might have challenges in relationships as well as strengths. We talked about some of the strengths, right? So some of the challenges for ADHDers is they have a really intuitive understanding of the social world, and they tend to be very great leaders. But sometimes when their attention shuts down for a second or their mind wanders somewhere else, they miss something. And then they're like, why is everyone mad? So they lose attention and they check in, but they understand how it works. So with an autistic brain, what I have found, and I haven't really seen this published, but I found it to be true in my practice, is they have a real intuitive sense of how things work in efficiency.
Okay.
I think that's the real gift they give to our society. There are so many people who have, the reason we have things that were invented or important is because of this gift. And for autistic folks, it's not all the social world, they're very concrete thinkers. They process social information differently.
Yeah.
So that has to be part of the work you do. I forget his last name, but Milton. Let me see if I can even find it.
Well, that sounds so familiar.
Oh, Dr. Milton, Damian Milton, right? So he came up with the double empathy theory.
Okay.
And what it is like you have two cultures. When you have two cultures get together, sometimes there's a culture clash.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that one culture is wrong than another culture. They're just different.
Yeah.
But there's a really great example by Catherine Crompton. She did a little experiment. She had, I don't know if you ever played the telephone game.
Yes.
Where one person at one end, he says a sentence and they pass it down through these different people. And at the end, they have the last person say what the sentence was and it's completely different. They had 3 groups. One group was all autistic people. One group was all non-autistic people. And one group was a mixed group. And what they found is that the non-autistic group did about the same as the autistic group in the telephone game, about like the amount of times the information changed. But where they really struggled with a totally different answer was in the mixed group. So a lot of the communication stuff, when your brain processes social information differently, like for the autistic brains, they're both thinking through interactions. Whereas in an ADHD brain, they're just doing it intuitively. They're not even thinking about it. So a lot of conflict or misunderstandings happens by just, storing and processing information differently. So you have to make space for that.
Yeah.
Because you can imagine what happens is the autistic folks are in the minority.
Mm-hmm.
And so the messages they get are real negative when they're not doing anything wrong. Different preferences. And so that has to also be part of it, because the conflict is not always going to be about what got laid down in the past. Certainly that affects our default and the messages we receive. But part of it is learning to work with your brain and understand other brains who work differently. And so the protocol I developed for EMDR and autism pulls out those pieces. And I'm teaching therapists how to recognize what's happening in the brain.
Wow.
And then also if you take in 30 to 50% more information, right? It's not going to generalize as well when you process the past. You just have more detail, which is the gift of the autistic brain. But with trauma processing, it means it's going to take longer. And then I have some ways to help with the generalization of the EMDR. So I give a whole 14-hour training on EMDR and autism to therapists, because I feel like if I can train more therapists to do it, I'm one person. Then we can normalize it for others, and more clients are going to get relief and get the help they need. And also, I want to change perceptions.
Mm-hmm.
So because it's just recently in the last couple of years that more autistic folks are coming out with their experience, it's not as normalized yet as ADHD.
Yeah.
So there's some stigma there that shouldn't even be there.
Yeah.
And so in this EMDR training I give is for, I call it, quote, subtle autism, although it doesn't feel subtle, but it's against the stereotypes. It's less obvious. So in my training, I have a lot of therapists self-identify. They feel like they can understand their family and friends better. So they say it's been personally healing,
Yes.
healing for their clients. So I've gotten a lot of feedback. I think it's so important to understand brain differences.
Oh, I love it. I know I'm waiting for your next workshop so I could attend. I've been
It'll be in the
sick.
summer. We have finally set up.
Yeah. I'm gonna keep bothering you until I can be able to get onto that one, because here in South Texas, in the RGV, I know that we have more predisposed children, adults with neurodivergence. I know there was some theory from another doctor that had told me, and this is just theory, that whenever people have trauma or displaced in generations, there's an overlap also with ADHD. But also when people from another country, let's say Mexico, and they come over here to another country, I mean, that's a characteristic of ADHD, because you have to be impulsive to be able to just drop everything that you know within your culture and go to another one. And so here in South Texas, I know that this used to be Mexico, not even 150 years ago. And so there was a lot of families that went back and forth. And so it just makes sense that generations after, and we're stuck in this border town with Mexican American culture where they're like, oh, ADHD, that doesn't exist. Nomás está chiflado. And so that's why, as well, for me, I try to be able to communicate what ADHD also is. And, oh, everybody has ADHD. No, not everybody. But it just so happens that the population in a certain demographic in a certain place may have more than others, and that's okay. So, yeah. And I want to talk about IFS too, because I know we have EMDR.
Okay.
But I want to talk about IFS. Can you explain how IFS, and for me, I've noticed it's been amazing for the neurodivergent population. And my theory is because we see so many things and we absorb so many things, and we love to just categorize everything and see everything in details. IFS is just like a godsend, and we put them where we want to, and we have more control. But what are your thoughts?
Oh, I love it. Well, I think for all brains, IFS is life-changing.
Yeah.
And so in the EMDR world, when you're working with not simple PTSD, simple PTSD is a single incident, complex PTSD, where it got laid down over a lifetime, or developmental PTSD, right? IFS is a way to work with the protective system. And so with that, so in the EMDR world, for trauma, a lot of people combined EMDR with some kind of parts work, whether it's ego state or IFS, because it's very, very helpful. So it's very, very helpful for everyone. And then for neurodivergent folks, like we said, do you like the categories? So, ADHD and autism have some differences. I think it's helpful for both of them, because when you grow up not understanding how your brain works, it can feel like a very unsafe space.
Yeah.
And we have to have a protective system to protect us. And so that's going to be a part of the work of identifying that.
Yeah.
And then for the autistic brain, or the odd ADHD, the ADHD autism that has a lot more detail, I think that works with this detail-oriented processing style. So what happens with autism, they default to the details first, which actually some people say sometimes you get a more accurate perception of what's going on, because they don't always kind of draw meaning first. They go to the details, right? And they might store things more discreetly, like from one context to the next. They might not put them in the same category. They might say, no, that's really different. Yeah. So then IFS, where you have these different categories, it's a way to get an overview and work with them together. So it's really, really helpful. And then the thing with parts work, whether it's IFS or ego state therapy, it gets into the implicit memory system. So EMDR works with explicit memory, concrete memories that you remember. Where IFS, it kind of rolls up the different neuronal bundles in our brain according to how they're functioning. Combining it with EMDR can be very powerful and have a higher generalization effect for all brains.
I love that. It's like you're touching base on how their brain works, and they're making those meanings in their own way with how they process in their own manner.
Yeah.
I love that. And polyvagal, it's new to me. I recently became certified, but You mentioned that, and I really want the population to know about polyvagal because it's huge. I've noticed big differences with polyvagal strategies. Can you talk about how we incorporate that?
Well, I think that's really huge for neurodivergent folks because we tend to not connect as easily with our body. Alexithymia with neurodivergent folks, up to 65% of folks have alexithymia. And that says it's hard to contact checking your body. So polyvagal theory is huge because it starts to teach you to self-monitor and take care of your nervous system. That's an area, if you're used to masking, if it's harder to self-reflect and self-monitor, which is one of the executive function challenges for neurodiverse brains, we need to practice them and start integrating it. We kind of tend to run out of steam because we have like an on-off switch. We're either off or we're on go. So polyvagal theory is great because it helps us track the nervous system. When am I in like shutdown or feeling hopeless or depressed? And what can I do to regulate and get out of that state? And then when am I feeling like scared or panicky or, rage? When we need to protect ourselves, we can learn what to do with that state. Sometimes what we do with the state is we kind of work out. Maybe we speak up so that can process. Sometimes the danger's not really there. It's like, you think there's your nervous system learned to protect yourself from a tiger. And in this situation, there's no tiger. So, when learning what to do and how to regulate and how to get back to a state of connection and calm with yourself and others is so healing because healing can't only happen in therapy. We need things we can also do outside of therapy to amplify the work so that we have choices and control. And then you also learn that what state you're in, it's not about you. Like if you're in that dorsal shutdown state, then you might have beliefs about it's hopeless.
Yeah.
I can't handle it, right?
Yeah.
And that's not really about it being hopeless and you can't handle it. It's about being in that dorsal shutdown state. So it can be so empowering. Oh, I just need to regulate and take a break and use my skills so that I can get in a different state where I have resources and I can handle it. Because we all have ability to handle it. It's just finding our way back there.
What's a quick polyvagal strategy? Because I don't want them to think it's like, oh, breathing in and out. But polyvagal has a different body mind strategy. What's a quick one so they could know the difference?
Well, breathing can help.
Mhm.
Sometimes if you're really activated and panicky, well, nothing's going to, that's in the fight flight zone. Nothing's going to calm you down like some breath.
Okay.
Now, for some neurodivergent folks, maybe if you're not connected to the body, it can feel like not as helpful.
Yeah.
Maybe later on in therapy, would that be helpful? If you're in the red and shutdown, you want to get active.
Okay.
Because when you're in dorsal shutdown, your whole body's slowing down. So you want to do the opposite of that.
Got it. So depending what state you're in,
Mhm.
because if they're in the red, they want to do breathing, and there's no way that's going to work because you actually
Yes.
have to do more.
Oh.
Yes. Okay.
And
Okay.
then,
I love that.
social engagement helps with all of those states. That's like the bottom ventral vagal system.
Yeah.
It's helping to regulate. That's what helps get us through things. If we can have support in it, red or yellow, or dorsal vagal, or the dorsal shutdown, or the fight flight, it can get a lot better when we can talk through it with someone. Or take a break, build up positives in our life and things we like.
Yeah.
So learning to read and work with your nervous system's huge.
Yes. I know there is a new term for neurodivergent people for the ADHD and recently, I'm talking months ago, maybe like 6 to 9 months, heard about rejection sensitive dysphoria,
Mhm.
RSD, and how it impacts self-worth and relationships. What are your thoughts on RSD with neurodivergence?
That I think William Dawson coined that term. I'm
Yes.
not sure when.
I have it here because I spoke about it, but it was in 2000. It's recent, but yes, Dawson did come up with it.
So what he says with it is that people who have ADHD or neurodivergent, they're more sensitive to criticism and teasing. They just have a more sensitive, their body doesn't handle it as well. And they tend to shut down and spiral and get anxious and overwhelmed more easily than other brains. And so knowing how the brain works with trauma, you have to take in past history with the sensitive nervous system. And so I think it's really a combination of things. It is having a more sensitive nervous system. You feel things more intensely. With ADHD, there's more, and autism, there's a lot of bottom up processing.
Okay.
And so they're going to feel the energy of that negativity and it's going to hit their system harder.
Okay.
And then if you've also, like we talked about, got all these negative messages that how your brain's wired biologically to work is wrong, you're going to have encoded a lot of anxiety and shame when people are upset. And that, what got locked in the brain and never resolved, is going to get triggered in the present. So it's going to be an intensity of whatever the default was to get mad and explode, or often for folks is to shut down and do a shame spiral. And so part of it is learning about your brain and learning to work with your sensitivity so you have some grace. But there's a huge part with healing and trauma therapies where you can actually rewire the shutdown response and the shame spiral. And it takes time. I have one odd ADHD client. I've been working with her for a long time. And we've been working on when she was criticized and people got upset. And she was so excited a few weeks ago in therapy. She's like, Christine, this thing happened. And I was dysregulated and didn't know what to do. And I was going to go in my shame spiral for days. And she's like, and I took a break. I went to the bathroom and washed my face. And then I was able to talk about it with my partner. And I didn't go into that shame spiral. So this has taken a lot of work for us to rework some of those memories to kind of undo the default of shutdown, to do something else. It's helpful.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. And yeah, he coined it and started in the early 2000s and started growing attention soon after. So it's super recent. It's not even in the DSM, but it's really recognized with the emotional regulation. And I can see how you mentioned we absorb a lot of things, and ADHD, neurodivergence, and anxiety and or depression kind of go hand in hand because of the prefrontal cortex and the disinhibition with it. And so HSP people, highly sensitive people, would also have the RSD. And just seeing, okay, this is, for me, I've that given to me all the time. Like, oh my gosh, you're so sensitive. We can't tell you anything. And growing up as a little kid, I was like, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with me because I'm crying and tears would just come out. And I hated that tears would come out. And now I don't mind it. You know what? This is my body. This is how it is.
Okay.
Sometimes they're happy tears. Sometimes they're not. And I'm not sensitive. I'm neurodivergent. And that's
Right.
okay. I take in. Yeah. And so it's just recognizing how you said and doing the strategies to make sure that it doesn't overwhelm you. So, yes, I love how you blend all of these approaches. What are some things, though, that you've learned that don't work in therapy with this type of population, and how have you adapted?
Not addressing the brain functioning. That anxiety and depression, it never, ever, ever going to shift. If you just try to work on the memory networks where those negative messages got down, but the client never learns to work with their brain, well, then you're always going to feel like you're inadequate because you don't understand how to work with your brain and how to get yourself to succeed. It just seems like a hit or miss thing. It seems so people, what gets laid down a lot is I'm a fraud.
Yeah.
Because they don't know how they're doing it. They don't have that understanding. So I think, you do use trauma treatments are life-changing for everyone and they're essential for neurodivergent folks. But without incorporating how your brain works, it's going to fail. And then people can get frustrated because they're doing the trauma work and things aren't shifting.
Yes. Yes. And then they'll think, oh my gosh, I'm broken because here we're doing
it
the
must be my
work.
fault.
Yes, there's something wrong with me. I'm broken. Oh my gosh. Yes. And this whole imposter syndrome makes so much sense with neurodivergence. If you don't know how your brain's working, you don't know how you're processing and doing these things, of course you're going to think, oh, it wasn't me, it was a fluke.
Yeah, a lot of very successful people feel like an imposter not because they are doing anything wrong, it's because they don't understand how it works. So they feel like, oh my goodness, I'm not advancing and succeeding because of my abilities. It's random. When it's not random, they're doing wonderful work. But when you understand what's happening, you have choices as opposing to this random thing. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. What would you want to tell the women who feel too much or believe that they're broken to know about themselves?
Oh, that they have a wonderful brain. Most of my clients, I always talk about the gift of our brains.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's so much to learn. I mean, nobody's broken, but it's so important to learn about how your brain works and the gifts of your brain. I've never worked with anyone who doesn't have amazing talent. But sometimes if you're neurodivergent, because we have trouble self-assessing and self-monitoring, it's hard to see what they are. And that can be such a wonderful discovery in therapy, not only to mitigate the challenges, but to enter into your strength.
Yeah.
And they absolutely have them. And a
Oh,
wonderful way even to begin. There's so many books out there and podcasts to even start. I mean, I'm always a fan of therapy, as you are, Anita, because we're therapists and we
yeah.
know how life-changing it can be.
Yeah.
But people have all different things they're juggling. So if they can't get into therapy, then maybe they can read a book. There's so many wonderful books out there that are so normalizing, or listen to a podcast like this or some of the other ones out there. The more you learn about the brain, it takes away the broken messages.
Yeah.
Because I think so many amazing things are happening because of neurodivergence.
Christine, this conversation has been so powerful. And before we wrap up, I'd love for you to share with our listeners where they can find you, where they can connect with your work, or learn more about your services and trainings.
Oh, well, perfect. So I am in Austin, Texas, but my practice is entirely online. After COVID, I found out that only 3 people wanted to come back in person. Everyone else wanted to stay online because it's so convenient and practical. And the results of therapy are actually the same as in person. So I decided just for 3 people, it made more sense to just have an online practice. So I can see people in Texas for individual therapy because that's what I'm licensed for. For a consultation for therapists who want to learn about EMDR healing or neurodivergence, I have people who come see me from all over the country. And my website is christinemolinacounseling.com. Can't think of anything else.
LinkedIn, I know you're on LinkedIn.
I'm on
Yeah.
LinkedIn as well.
Molina.
But I really recommend my website if you want to find out more information. I have some free resources for clients on the resources tab. I have some resources for therapists on EMDR on the therapist tab. And then I think I also have a link to my EMDR and autism training on there as well.
I missed where I was at because I was enjoying our conversation.
I've enjoyed you so much, Anita. Get it.
I know. Got it. I found it. So, Christine, I always like to close each episode with 2 reflective power questions that speak to the heart of what this podcast is about: legacy, empowerment, and healing across generations. And these are questions I ask every guest, and they often reveal so much truths. So take a moment to answer from the heart. Christine, what is your definition of an empowered woman?
Oh, I think an empowered woman is one who knows themselves, right? Both their strengths and weaknesses, because we're all in the same boat, and has support, can know where to find support, can, kind of make some space for what they're needing in their goals and figure out how to get there.
Beautiful. I love that. And the second question, imagine that everything about your work, your story, who you are was somehow lost over time, completely erased from memory due to unforeseen events. And generations later, 3 generations down the line in the future, a single handwritten letter of yours is found by your great-great-granddaughter. What truth would you want to pass on to her? Something that would inspire her and help further empower more women within the generation?
Oh, I would say believe in yourself. I really believe we all have gifts within.
Yeah.
And as we learn to tap into that inner strength and understand our wisdom, we will get led to what we need. And so when we can believe in ourselves, find people who can believe it, we surround us with those who believe in us. There is a well of strength within each person.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your warmth, your heart with us today. You're doing so much important work. And I know our listeners are walking away feeling more seen and supported because of you. And to everyone listening, you're not broken. You may be carrying pain, masking your needs, or living in survival mode, but you're also capable and worthy and wired for healing. And if this episode resonated, please share with a friend, a loved one. And you can find all the links to Christine's work and her work in the show notes. And don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, I'm Anita Sandoval. Stay grounded, stay compassionate, and remember, you're not broken, you're becoming.
Thanks for listening to Empowering Women in Conversations. This conversation has ended, but your journey to empowerment continues. Please share with someone you know who will find this conversation helpful and inspiring. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Until our next empowered conversation with your host, licensed professional counselor, Anita Sandoval. And remember, we are brave. We are strong. We are compassionate. We are women empowered. Go out there and claim your power.